and Certified Associate Project Manager, and is currently pursuing his MBA at Boston University. With extensive experience in both private and government sectors, he has excelled in the role of a senior IT auditor, showcasing his expertise and commitment to maintaining robust information systems. In this session today, participants will gain a comprehensive understanding of the IT audit process. This session will cover key aspects such as the fundamentals of IT governance, risk management, and compliance, with a specific focus on the role of IT audits in ensuring organizational resilience. Attendees will explore best practices for conducting thorough IT audits, identifying vulnerabilities, and strategizing recommendations to fortify information systems. Please help me welcome Gael Bober with a round of applause.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Today we are going to talk about cybersecurity in general. So we are going to put in place a context where you are the owner of a business, and we are going to try to understand why performing an IT audit within your business is very important. So if you have any question, maybe because your background is not an IT background, please feel free to raise your hand and I can answer the question. So my name is Gael Bobeuf. I have more than 10 years of experience in the IT field. I've been working as a system engineer and network administrator, but today I work mostly in the cybersecurity field, mainly as a governance, risk, and compliance analyst, and also as an IT auditor. So today we are going to talk about why it is important to perform an IT audit. Whether you are a small company like a law firm or a real estate company or even a Fortune 500 company, no one is spared. Everyone owning a business is subject to a cyber attack, just because of the fact that within your business you're using information technology. And because you're using information technology, which is a tool, you bring inside of your business something we call technological risk. And these risks, they need to be managed properly. So within your business, for instance, you need to establish what we call a risk register. And this risk register will host all the risk that you have from an IT perspective, all the risks that you have from an operational perspective, and each risk needs to have a risk owner assigned to it. So these, in terms of technology, so technology is not an end goal. It's not a purpose of itself. Business are using information technology to either improve the quality of the service they offer their end user. They're using information technology to be more competitive. They are using information technology to increase their productivity. So for the business, information technology is just a tool. And now, because this tool is being used inside of this business, you need to understand what type of risk using this IT tool is bringing inside of your information system, which is your business. Whether you are using a specific software for accounting, whether you're using a specific system for logistics, QuickBooks, for example, your business may have a vulnerability because of the fact you're using this tool. Now, the first step is to understand and identify the type of IT risk that may disrupt your business. Now, what is the risk? A risk is simply the intersection between a vulnerability, a threat, and an asset. Let's say the asset is, for example, your web server. Well, a web server is just a computer that is hosting the web pages of your website. Let's say you have www.cosetech.com, which is your grocery store shop or your bakery shop. You're selling bread. Now, you have www.cosetech.com, which is the web server. It's exposed to the internet, which means a hacker can try to hack this web server and make sure that your website is down. Now, for a business like Amazon, for instance, which is 100% online, Amazon doesn't have any physical store. This is a huge risk because they are hosting their web servers and their servers is facing the internet where all the bad guys are. Now, the web server is the asset. What is the vulnerability? The vulnerability is that on this server hosting your website, you may have a specific software, whether it's Apache or IIS, that is making the web server running that has a bug, or there is a security fixes that was not installed on it, or there is a specific vulnerability inside of the server that will, for instance, allow a attacker to breach the server. Let's say, for example, they use an attack called denial of service. This attack, what the attacker will do, they will send like thousands of connection requests to the server by second, which means your server now will no longer be available to the legitimate users. In this case, your web server, your website will be down, which means you can no longer sell online, and that's the way the attack is being done. So this vulnerability inside of this web server need to be managed. And the threat is basically the attacker, the probability for the attacker to exploit the vulnerability within your asset. So the risk in this situation is the likelihood, the probability of something bad happening, the hacker exploiting the vulnerability inside of your server, times the impact. What is the magnitude of the impact? What is the level of catastrophe that can happen if your server is down? Now, for some organization, this risk may be low, this risk may be medium, this risk may be high. For example, in the case of Amazon, for instance, this risk, the likelihood will be high times the impact will be high. So because Amazon is an online shop. In your case, maybe you don't sell online, this risk may be low. Now, this is a specific example. You need to do this for your whole organization. Basically, do what we call a business impact analysis. The business impact analysis will basically review all the business unit inside of your organization and understand what will be the impact within this specific function inside my business if the service goes down, how we are going to resume operation, if the business is going to be able to provide the service that they need to do. So one of the first steps to do is to identify all your assets. So you cannot protect something if you don't know you have it. So you need to have an accurate inventory of all your assets. And here, I'm not necessarily talking about fixed asset. I'm talking about IT asset, whether it's your workstation, the computer the receptionist is using, or the computer the CEO is using. Every single asset needs to be identified, which means they know where they are, then they know who is using it. And then, after identifying all the assets inside of the organization, you need to identify, prioritize the risk based on if it's high, medium, or low. Now, because of all these risks, the organization or your business need to establish what we call security control in order to mitigate or protect to mitigate this risk, and the risk is going to be lower. Now, the security control, there is different type of security control. There is a physical control. For example, you can have a dog in front of the door of your office. You can have a gate. You can have cameras. These are physical security control to protect your facility. You can have technical control. For example, in the case of your web server, which is hosting your website, you can put in place something we call a firewall that will be between your server and the internet that will protect the hacker from accessing the server. We can also have an administrative control. Administrative control are usually a document, a policy, for example, that will say, oh, inside this organization, we need to do background check before we hire someone. It can be also a procedure that will explain how the IT team need to operate and do a specific task within the organization. So the security control is just a mechanism, a tool, a mean to mitigate the risk inside of your organization. So the security control can be also preventative, like the gate or the camera will prevent someone from entering the facility if they see there is a camera. There is a detective control. In this case, there is also corrective control. An example of corrective control is, for instance, a business continuity plan. You are going to correct the situation. Let's say there is a tsunami or an earthquake, and your entire server room, your entire building collapsed. Now, you should have in place a business continuity plan that will correct the situation. Now, this is a document that you have written in the past that will say step by step how to resume operation and how the business is going to continue to provide services. This is an administrative control and a corrective. The type is administrative because it is a document, and the control function is a corrective function. Now, the security control, basically, we've seen it, it's going to mitigate the risk, which means reduce the probability of the risk happening. But this is not the only way we can mitigate a risk. We can address a risk. There is different type of way we can address a risk. Before you decide on how you're going to address a specific risk, after you have implemented a risk register, you have the list of all the IT risks within your organization. The first step is to do a risk assessment by identifying everything. Now, we see that we can mitigate the risk, but also the organization can say, oh, I'm going to avoid this risk. Why? Because the cost for me to implement a specific security control is not worth it. So I'm not going to have a web server, for instance. I'm going to avoid this risk completely. I'm not going to implement or configure this web server. Or you can transfer the risk. Let's say you buy an insurance policy. In this case, you transfer the risk to a third party because you don't want to deal with it. And then you're gonna pay someone to manage this risk for you, whether it's a third party vendor. Or you can accept the risk. When you analyze the risk, you see, okay, the value of this server is not enough for me to pay attention to it. So this is a residual risk. I'm just going to accept the risk and not do anything about it. So these are the 4 ways you can address and manage risk. So first step, you assess the risk. You prioritize the risk based on the level of the value of the asset. Then you figure out what is the risk profile of the organization. And then you decide how you want to address the risk, whether you want to avoid, mitigate, accept, or transfer it. Then you execute a risk strategy, which will be a plan. You need to have a risk management policy that will explain how the organization is going to manage this risk. And then you implement the security control that you want to implement. Now, why do we need to do an IT audit? The IT audit is going to explain to you what is the level of your risk exposure. What is the amount of IT asset that your organization is currently using, and they will create a chart, a risk matrix for you that will tell you these are your risk and what is the level of exposure. The IT audit is going to produce a report that will explain the different vulnerability that you have, whether you're using a specific software or your operating system is maybe outdated, or someone can get into a specific accounting system without authorization. And then some people, most of the time, they do an IT audit because they need to be compliant to a specific regulation. For example, right now, everyone that wants to deal with the government or a federal entity, they need, for instance, to be CMMC compliant. And to be CMMC compliant, you need to perform an IT audit where the auditor will come and assess the amount of security control that you have in place to make sure that you're authorized to deal or to do business with the government. Otherwise, you won't even be able to apply for a specific bid and have a contract with the government. Now, in order to do that, you need to have an IT audit that will review your overall information system to make sure that your cybersecurity maturity is on top. So how does the audit go? The first thing, you're going to define the objective of the audit, because it's very important that you understand what is the scope of the audit, because you can have an IT auditor, they come and they don't necessarily going to audit your whole entire information system. Maybe they say, oh, I'm going to audit just this specific application. So they're going to review the access control in place. Let's say you just want to audit your accounting system to see, oh, well, the reconciliation and the balance sheet correct? Did someone try to do a fraud or perform any action? They are going to review all the log inside of the accounting system. So in this case, the audit is just, the scope of the audit is just this accounting system. And then you're going to develop the plan for the audit and consider what type of criteria or framework you're going to use. For example, if you're a clinic or a hospital, maybe you want to be compliant with HIPAA because you are hosting protected health information inside of your system, or any type of personal identifiable information, PII, such as social security numbers. Then you need to be compliant with a specific framework. Then the auditor is going to come and review all of that and select a specific criteria to perform the audit. Now, one of the things that's important if you're hiring a consultant or an auditor to come to your business, they need to understand your culture, the way your business operation is working. Because you may have your business, and then there is a principle that called the principle of the least privilege, where all that says that every end user must not have administrative right inside of the organization, because there is no need for that. But in the specific case, maybe the CEO need to have local admin right, because if he doesn't have it, then there is a specific operation in the business that will be disrupted. Now, the consultant need to understand this specific situation inside of your organization and allow this to happen. It's very important because the culture and the way organization work varies from business to another business, and it's very important to understand how the business environment is before you perform the audit. So the process of the audit is very simple. You're gonna have an engagement letter to the auditor or the consultant, and then they are going to come to your business. They are going to do an evaluation. They are going to do multiple interviews with the IT team, the business process owners, the different stakeholders inside of the organization to understand the business. And then in the entrance meeting is basically the kickoff of the audit. They are going to gather a bunch of evidence. So they're going to basically review what type of security control that you have in place. And if you have policies and procedure in place, they are going to read them and test to see if what you said in your policy you are actually doing. Are you doing security awareness training? Are you doing the background check whenever there is a new hire? When there is a termination, are you disabling the account right away so that the end user cannot connect even though they don't work in the company anymore? They are going to, this is what we call the field work, where the auditor is going to put their boots on the ground on the field and come to your organization and observe, reconciliate, and to see how you're doing your business, if it's correct. And then at the end, they are going to do a report, and all the observation, all the finding, they are going to put it on a piece of paper and produce all the recommendation to your organization. Maybe they are going to recommend to put more security control in place or to review a specific test. So this is what the process of an audit will look like. Now, the most time-consuming part of the audit is basically the field work, because it's in the field work. Back in the day, the field work was always on site. Now you can perform the field work remotely, where the company can just share their screen. In the field work, they are going to review your IT procedures and your policies. They are going to review access control. Can anyone get into the organization, or can anyone connect to your software without authorization? They are going to see what type of network security you have in place inside of your network. Can anyone go to any type of illicit or any type of website that they should not go? Physical security, they are going to see if your building is secure. Can anyone go to the office of the CEO without permission, for example? Vendor management, this is extremely important right now, because most of the cyber attack, they go through the supply chain right now. Well, why would you, if you are a attacker or a hacker, why would you try and hack the Pentagon? Why? Because there is no way you will, because your chance of hacking the Pentagon is very low. So what they do right now is to go through a third-party vendor that works with the Pentagon. Maybe it's a small mom and shop pop company, or they don't have high or secure environment. They are going to hack this small business company and then go through them to access the Pentagon. That's why whenever you're doing business with a vendor, or whether you are buying a software from them or you are acquiring a specific type of service from them, you need to do your due diligence by reviewing the level of security of this vendor, because they are going to have access to some information inside of your organization. So if they hack them, they can hack you as well. Yes.
Oh no, I was just answering. Why would you want to go for the supply chain?
Yeah. So that's the reason. It's very important to do a vendor management review of any third party that you are going to work with as a business. Security awareness training, very important. Are you doing campaign to inform or to educate your employee about what they can do, what they must not do, what they can post on social media or not? Very important. This need to be done. Back in the day, you used to do that once a year. Now they are recommending to do a security awareness training every quarter. Data security, what type of data that you are hosting, PII, health information, medical record, depending on the type of data, you need to have a data security policy in place, a data classification to classify the different data. Vulnerability assessment, do you have a tool that can scan your network or your business to perform a vulnerability assessment, and they will tell you this software or this operating system has a specific vulnerability, and then you need to put a security patch or an update on the system. Incident response, if you get hacked or if there is a natural disaster, do you have an incident response plan in place that will allow you to provide a response to this situation? So, and then after the field work, basically, they are going to produce this report where they will explain everything they've seen, everything they've observed, and then put a list of recommendations together and submit it to the management. Now, the management team is going to review it and say whether they agree or not with the recommendation, and then at this point, after the management agree with the recommendation, they are going to put in place what we call a POEM. The POEM is a plan of action and milestone, which is basically like a project where the management is going to say, okay, this is the list of recommendations that you gave me. By this date, a timeline of how they are going to remediate to all the recommendations that they say. Now, usually, one of the top audit findings that we see is that the organization doesn't have any policies or procedure in place. Just like you need now to do a DEI policy, you need to have an information security program policy. You need to put in place access control in place to make sure not everybody can access to any type of data. Sometimes they don't have the updated software in place. The software is working fine and they don't care about updating it. But you need to understand the reason there is an update is because they found a bug or a vulnerability. Let's say you're using Adobe Reader and then you're still using Adobe Reader 6 or 7, which is, you can read your PDF very well, but if a hacker can use this vulnerability in Adobe version 6, then you're out of luck. And then lack of security awareness training. Most of the time, organization, they don't have that. And inadequate incident response planning. Now, this is the most common recommendation that we see. To conclude, I would like to ask you a question. Have you ever lost your phone and in this phone there was the picture, the birthday picture of your daughter, and you didn't have the time to back it up, or a very memorable moment that you capture and you will never be able to see this picture anymore because the phone is lost, but you have no backup? Or were you working on a report for several days or weeks and then you spilled water or coffee on the laptop? Now the laptop doesn't turn on anymore and you lost this report forever. Well, I've been working for a managed service provider where they got hacked with a ransomware attack, and when we went to restore their backup, we realized that their backup was done 360 days ago. This basically means there is no more data for accounting, no data for customer. They don't know what they owe. They don't know what is the current status of their customers. So the data, the last data they have is basically dated a year ago. So basically they cannot resume operation. Client is crying, they don't know what to do. The business is about to close down. Now, this situation, they can be avoided just by doing a regular IT audit. Now, this client, if they have done a yearly IT audit, well, the auditor would have reviewed if they do their backup properly, the auditor would have told them about it and write it down as a recommendation that your backup are not being done properly. Now, the whole reason of doing an IT audit is to avoid this type of situation. Thank you for your attention. POEM, yes. It's a POAM. Yes, plan of action and milestone. Now, this POEM is usually the result of the report that the auditor will give to the management. Now, they're going to create this POEM, which is a project based on all the recommendations that the auditor gave. It's literally a plan to remediate all the vulnerabilities or missing security control that the auditor was able to observe.
And how often do you recommend that companies do that?
So an IT audit needs to be done on a yearly basis. That's an external IT audit. But within your organization, you need to do internal audit by yourself to put some checkpoint, because by the time the external audit come, you may have some vulnerabilities to address yourself. Because it's very important that to understand that you can do a self-assessment. If you have a team or you have some minimum knowledge, you can do regular quarterly self-assessment by the time the IT auditor come to perform this yearly audit. And the yearly audit also can come with different type of thing. It can come with a vulnerability assessment, a risk assessment, a penetration testing, which is when they try to simulate and hack of your organization, but you know that they are doing it. So they are going to simulate if someone is trying to penetrate your system, how they will do that. So it's a complete package.
For instance, I work with a lot of micro businesses,
Mhm.
right? A one-person shop. Like Paula here has her event planning business. She's a one-woman shop. So for organizations like that don't have a huge budget, it's a one person. What do you recommend for them? What kind of plan of action that would be at their level that they could still do, so they are not just because of cost, or they are not just intimidated by this whole process?
Sure. The IT audit, the engagement leader is always going to be based on the complexity of the IT infrastructure that the business is hosting. Now, for example, if it's a one-person shop, so the scope basically is one workstation. So the auditor can come and analyze this workstation, this or laptop, and make sure, for example, maybe she's using an administrative account. She should not do that. Maybe the operating system is outdated and she's using an old version that is not supported by the vendor anymore, in this case probably Microsoft or Apple, and then there is an update available that will be a fix for a security bug. So um, normally the budget for the audit is per hour. So in this case, it's gonna be very quick. It can be 1 to 3 hours to perform the audit for this workstation. Mhm. So, especially if you want to focus on what you can do best, which is your business operation, whether, for example, let's say you're selling bread, you want to delegate this type of technical task to an expert or someone that can do that well for you, so you can have this peace of mind that you are not going to be hacked. Now, as long as your business is using an internet connection, a workstation, there may be a vulnerability inside of your business. So it's very important to do at least once a year an IT audit. Any question? If you have any question on your way back home, please feel free to email me at gael@cozetech.com. Thank you again. Fidel, if you have any announcement, I believe they can serve themselves.
And then we'll wrap up with a little slide of this. Thank you.